Hey guys, it's Nerdnick, and I'm bringing you part 5 of the How to Design Dollar Tree Foam Board Airplanes tutorial. In this video we're going to be covering how to join your tail feathers, how to start on your poster board, and also miscellaneous items like power pod, holes in the fuselage, the barbecue skewer hole, the wing cutout, things like that that are kind of just leftover last pieces of information or pieces of design that we need to talk about as well as you need to work on. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in. We're going to get started with the tail feathers section. I usually leave this to last for a very specific reason. If you watched the previous video, you saw me make a mistake as I was designing the belly and top plate of the fuselage. I had to go back and fix it. Because of that, you want to make sure that the tail feather section is one of the last things you do so that you can catch all the little mistakes up until this point. Because if you do this part first, you might have to go back and change things later. And this is probably my least favorite part of the design because it's a little tricky to get right. But it's not too bad. I've kind of simplified it down to a pretty straightforward process. Okay, so the very first thing I want to do is start with my vertical stabilizer. And if I go ahead and remove the rest of these pieces from view, just so you can't see them anymore. Okay, all we have right now is our vertical stabilizer, and it looks like that. Okay, we purposely didn't do any of this part of the design because we want to wait until everything else is all set. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take the top of the fuselage where the horizontal stabilizer is going to sit, which is here, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of mock draw in a piece of foam where the horizontal would actually occupy. So from the drawing I can see that the horizontal starts about here and ends about here. So this space from here back is going to be occupied by the horizontal stabilizer, and it's going to be this thick. So there's 0.5 centimeters, and then moving back 0.5 centimeters as well. I'm sorry, moving back about 11 centimeters, but that gives you my height. So this is essentially where the horizontal stabilizer is going to sit when it's all built and put together. So now I know how far down to bring the vertical, how far up I need to bring it, and I can start kind of inching my way towards a complete piece here. So the first thing I want to do then is bring this down to meet my height. Okay, so I'm going to bring this piece down just a smidge and then line it up. So it's lined up, and then I'm going to bring it over because this is going to sit right on top here, and then I'm going to bring it back just a little bit, and I'm going to zoom back out here. So looking at where the horizontal stabilizer is going to sit, it looks like right around here is where I have my hinge line, right? It's actually lined up more so with here, but this is the I think this is like the cut forward part, so that actually doesn't matter. It's more back here. So from here to here on the horizontal stabilizer is a solid non-moving piece. I want to put my tab for the vertical roughly in the middle of that. I don't want to go too far forward or too far back, because then you have a very small amount of foam on both sides, or on one side, sorry, and it makes it a little weaker. If you go right in the middle, then you have, a good 1.5 inches on both sides of strength, right? You don't want any really thin part of foam. So I'm going to go back, right about to the middle, and I'm going to start my tab, okay? And the tab is going to be as deep as one sheet of foam. And then for the length, there is no amount. You just want a decent amount so that this has a sturdy connection. If you make this tab too thin, then the vertical stabilizer can be a little weak. So you want to make this pretty wide, but the wider you make this, the more foam you're cutting out of the horizontal stabilizer now. You're technically making that weaker. We're going to go ahead and reinforce this with a barbecue spar anyway, a barbecue skewer spar, so I'm not really concerned about that. But if you're not going to be doing that, then making this tab bigger ultimately removes foam from your horizontal stabilizer. So it's kind of a trade-off, but with the barbecue skewer spar, it makes it very strong. So now I'm going to continue my my line here that I was already on, and I actually want to get my my height to be exact. So I'm going to do. I'm just going to start the line, then I'll move it up or down so that it's the same height as the previous line. So then I'm going to go back right until the hinge joint, and the hinge joint again, it's going to be right here. This is where the horizontal is going to go down and up, right? It's going to move up and down on the same hinge line. And I'm just going to stop just a little bit before it, not right after, not on it, but just a little bit before. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring this line in to the same height as the other one. So I'm just going to go ahead and click, hold shift and move once I get over here, so I know I'm on the same height. And I'm just going to hold down, click, hold down shift, and then click, hold down shift, and then move to the left to right there. Okay, that one's lined up. Now I'm going to go to the bottom piece, and we're going to close up this gap. I'm going to move up now until just a little bit shy of the bottom piece. So again, this space right here represents the horizontal stabilizer. I don't want to go all the way up. I don't want it to touch. I want it to be just shy of it. And then I'm going to bring this over, and I'm going to stop at the same distance as this top piece. So now I have a gap right here, and this flap will be able to flip over left or right because it'll have a hinge line. So it'll, you can move out of the way to get everything lined up as you connect the horizontal and the vertical. So what I want to do now is I want to go back and I want to remove that first line that I made. I don't want that one, and I don't want that one anymore. That's not necessary. I want to join the rest of this up so that it completes this piece. So we're going to go ahead and raster size these first ones. There's that, and we're going to join that into the vertical stabilizer. So there's our vertical stabilizer there. And now we need to decide how is my hinge line going to be created, because with the design we chose, or I chose with the horizontal stabilizer here, I decided to go with a one piece, whereas most planes and the plane you're probably designing has, it looks like it's one piece, but really it's actually not connected in the middle. It has two separate rods going to it, or two servos controlling it, or however they're doing it. But that's a little tricky to do with foam board. It can be done, but this is much simpler. But because of this, I need to now notch the stabilizer, the vertical stabilizer, to allow movement of this piece. And the bigger that I make this piece, the stronger it's going to be, because your servo is going to connect on one of these sides. And what ends up happening over time is this middle part and the side starts to stress, because since your servo is on one side, it's nice and sturdy as you pull up elevator, go down, but the other side's kind of home free, so it can kind of bend up and down as the wind is moving across the surface, and it starts to wear out this foam. Any foam that can move with Dollar Tree foam board will eventually wear out. Ideally, you'd want no wiggle, no vibration, no bending of Dollar Tree foam board, because anything that stresses and bends under weight or under wind or speed will eventually wear out. The paper starts to give away, the foam gives up, and you get a bad bad piece there. And so the wider you can make this center section, the stronger this is going to be and the longer it's going to last. I also recommend reinforcing this with like a barbecue skewer or a popsicle stick or something, piece of hobby wood or whatever you want to do to make this joint stronger, and that will greatly increase the life of your plane. And also, if you're flying fast or you have a very large surface, what can end up happening is you can give an input like up elevator or down elevator, and the side with the servo arm will hold strong, but the other side will actually be stressed so much that it'll push itself down and actually cause the plane to roll, like you have like flaperons or something. It acts, or like elevons, it acts like you have one input going up, one input going down. And so instead of getting a nice clean elevation raise or dive, the plane wants to roll. And if you're going fast and this happens, it can be very dangerous. Or if you just have a bigger plane that's doing this, it can be really hard to control because it won't ever respond correctly to your elevator. It'll kind of always turn to the left or the right depending on what you're doing. So that's really bad. You don't want that for safety reasons, as well as it just flies awful. So you want this to be strong. So with that being said, we chose a pretty wide area. And so that means I need to remove this much area out of my vertical section. In this case, it would be just the rudder, so that when I move up elevator, it will actually, you know, move freely. So here's how we're going to do that. We're going to grab our piece, and I'm going to Control T, and then I'm going to hold down Shift and spin it around. So that holding down Shift clicks it on the axis here, so it doesn't spin freely, but it spins on like every 15 degrees. And now I have a better idea of where this is going to sit. So when we looked at it before, we said the stabilizer is going to start here and it's going to end right about here. If I line this up now, I should be pretty close to being on there. Okay, so when I look at it, I'm a smidge wider. No, actually, I'm good, because it's going to start right here. I think that's where it's really blurry. Maybe it's right about here. Yeah, I think it's right about here. Actually, no, that's off, because my hinge line should be here. So that might be a design issue by me right there. I might need to look at that, because this, according to this picture, it should come out to about here and then extend back to here. But with the way I'm lined up right now, it should, and this is basically where it's going to line up. I'm actually sticking out way further and not going far enough forward. So I need to take a look at that real quick and see, what am I doing? What did I do wrong here? So we're going to undo that twist. We're going to bring it back down and see if I can figure out why that's not lining up. Because according to this image, and we'll double check, I guess, right? This is another way to double check to make sure that we know which image might be on or off, or which one is close. So according to this image, where the vertical stabilizer ends, where it connects to the fuselage, so the lowest part of the curve. Now we extended it out further with that little lip for the posted board to connect to, but where it would disappear into the fuselage is the same location as where this horizontal piece crosses over. So let's go back up and look and see if that is what we're seeing on the side view, because that might not be what we're actually seeing, and that might be part of the issue. So let's go ahead and zoom in. So according to that image, right about here is where it disappears into the fuselage. So this part's coming back, this will be posted board, it comes up, and then right about here is where it starts to gain altitude, and this will be hidden up to this point. Now if I zoom in a little bit, it looks like that's actually past. So this point is, a smidge past, so it actually should sit back a little further. Let's go ahead and double check again where that is supposed to be then. We're going to go ahead and flip it back around. We're going to move it back into place. And if my hinge line is right on the same, that's actually about right. Right about where it disappears is where I'm going. So this image here, one of these images is off, but the original design that I chose to go off of was based on this position, where the hinge lines line up, and right about where the nose dives into the fuselage is where it should go. So I'm going to call that good. I don't think it's going to cause any characteristic issues or flight issues. I don't think it's going to impact anything. The wing is already so far back from the tail feathers. Some planes it's very close, and that can cause some weird balance issues. Not balancing the plane from a CG standpoint, but like roll issues, or if you go pull up elevator or whatever, it might kind of, instead of responding and climbing, it might kind of flutter a little bit beforehand, or kind of sink into it. It'll feel like a really squishy plane to fly. That's a weird kind of way to say it, but that's the best way to describe it, instead of a crisp, responsive plane. But because the tail feathers and the wing are so far apart, this is actually very stable. It's a very, very stable plane, and when you give it any input, it should feel solid and it feels strong. It should be nice and crisp. So I don't think moving it, even if I'm moving it back, an inch or so, or half an inch, will cause any issues. And it doesn't seem to cause any alignment issues at all. Because some planes, if you move it back too far, and you're like, oh yeah, here's the hinge line. Now when I have to cut my groove for this to move, I might break through the entire piece or whatever, or it might be too low, and it might cause an issue where there's not enough foam when I make my hinge piece. So that's something to watch out for too. With this Spitfire, that's not a concern. There's so much space here in the rudder that I can cut out a huge notch without a problem. Okay, so what I need to decide now is where the heck am I going to start with this line? Okay, so when I zoom in a bit, what I want to do is the middle of this piece, so the widest piece from the nose of it to the cutout piece, should be in line with where my horizontal is going to sit. So if it's going to sit right there, I want to move this down just a little bit more, just so I know I have the widest spot over where the actual piece is going to sit. Okay, so we're going to move this down, and I'm just going to call that good, since this doesn't really change in width across this whole piece. And right here in the middle, from here over, this is my widest point for my cut. Okay, so I want to make sure actually this is over just a little bit. I want to move this in. I don't want to be right on top of it. I want to have a little bit of room, because when you bevel cut this and it moves down, you're going to lose a little space as it moves. So you want to have a little bit of a gap, and that's also why I have a gap on the rudder versus the edge of the fuselage. I don't have it touching, because when I move my rudder in, it's going to close some of that gap, and I don't want it to rubber touch. So I'm going to bring it back just a little bit, not too much, but just a little tiny bit. And then I'm going to grab my line tool, and I'm just going to make a reference line. I need to go from here all the way to here to make a proper cut. And now I want to decide how much throw do I want? How much potential elevator input do I want to give in each direction? And like I said, this design is going to be a very, very responsive rudder. I don't need a lot, or sorry, elevator. I don't need a lot of throw, so I don't need to cut this big old chunk out. Really, when you look at the degrees of this, something around here would probably even be too much still. But this is a decent amount if I wanted to, if I was flying really slow and I wanted to give it a lot of input. So I'm gonna say this is the amount I want, and I'm gonna move until I'm about that far from my my piece there. Okay, because this line's going to curve in. This is the widest point. As it moves up, it's going to move closer to the fuselage. As it moves down, it'll be at this furthest point right at level, and then it'll move in closer to the fuselage again. So it's going to be a nice curved movement. Okay, so now I'm going to go to this line that I created for the bottom part, and I'm going to do the same thing, about the same amount of degree of throw, and then about the same distance from there. Okay. Now the next part is a little tricky, but really you're just going to draw as curved of a line as you can. I'm going to start at the middle, and I'm going to go out a little bit, and I'm going to come in just like that. And then we're going to do the same thing on the top. We're going to come up a little bit, we're going to come over, and then we're going to end it just like that. Now the cool thing about this is, once we get, as you know, this is pretty close. This might not even need any tweaking. Once we build it, it might be perfect. But it's close enough that if I have to when I'm building it, I can cut a little more, or if it's too much space, I can make an adjustment and leave a little bit. I'm not going to have to make a drastic change to this, because I'm right within the length. I'm right within the appropriate amount of space. So the only thing I might have to adjust is maybe give it a little more angle if I want, maybe a little less if I know it's way too much. And once we cut it out, once we see it, once we feel it, we'll know if that's the case. But from a starting standpoint, I know that's going to clear, it's not going to catch, and it's going to be nice and clean. I have plenty of foam left over on my rudder. It's not going to, cutting this out, it's not going to weaken it too much. Like it's not too low, and it doesn't cut too much foam out, it doesn't go too far in. So the rudder's still going to be very strong, and we'll have no impact there. You're not even going to know it's there. Okay, so let's go ahead and join these pieces now. But first I'm going to go ahead and remove that measuring one that I created. Don't want that. And I'm going to hide the horizontal here just so it's out of the way, so you get an idea of what you're looking at. And we'll go ahead and hide the fuselage too again, just so I can make sure this is all lined up. And look at that, it's actually not. I lined up this piece with my fuselage, not with my vertical stabilizer. So I need to go find that piece. It should be one of my middle pieces here somewhere. There it is. So this piece I'm going to actually delete, and we're going to redraw that piece. So we're going to start right here, and we're going to go right to there. So another reason why we started before the hinge joint is because, again, as the surface moves up or down, you actually lose space, so it comes closer to itself. So as it consumes that space, we want to have enough room that it doesn't then bunch up or clash or hit another piece. Okay, so we want to give it a little bit of wiggle room there. Okay, now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and join all these pieces. Raster size them and then join those layers, and then we're going to join that to the vertical stabilizer. There's our actually, let's go back one step first before we join them. I'm going to select the vertical stabilizer, and I'm going to erase this red part of the line, because we don't want that floating in the air now that we have our cutout picked. Oops. There we go. So now when I join them, it'll be nice and clean, and I won't have to try not to erase the lines. Okay, we'll rename this. So there's our vertical stabilizer. We've got our tab, we've got our cutout. This piece is nearly done. the next thing we want to do is take the horizontal stabilizer and figure out how the heck are we going to do this next piece. Okay, how do we line up, how do we design the notch so that this is all proper? The first thing we're going to do is we're just going to simply take what we have and we're going to make the hole. We're going to make the notch hole and then we'll move it into place as we need. So the depth of this is going to be the width of a piece of foam. So if I take the depth doesn't matter because the depth's the width of a foam, so it's gonna go right into the horizontal and it should have a flap underneath. So I don't need to worry about the depth. What I need to worry about first is the width. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab the width, and I'm gonna go a smidge wider just because if it's too tight, it's not gonna fit very well. And if it's just a perfect fit with a little glue, it holds nice and snug. So we want to err on the side of a little bit bigger. And then the width of this hole is going to be the width of a piece of foam, which incidentally is the same width as what we've already drawn. So I can actually, truthfully, just trace this. But I'm going to go a little bit wider. Like I said, I want to err on the side of having a little bit more space than not enough space. So I'm going to cut it just a little bit. We're going to bring this one down and over. And then I'm going to go back over here. And we're going to finish that off. Okay? So now that we have those raster size and merge, we have our tab. So this tab represents the width of the foam, the length of the cutout in the vertical stabilizer, and then the depth is going to be the depth of a piece of foam. So it's all going to line up perfectly in terms of the size and the shape. Now the position is important because when we design this piece, if you put it off-centered somewhere or not right exactly where it needs to be, then when you install your horizontal, it's going to be off, right? So we already know our position in terms of how far in to the horizontal stabilizer needs to sit. We know that it sits right there. It doesn't need to move because I'm in position right now with my vertical. Lines up with the fuse perfectly. It lines up with the position of the hinges for both the horizontal and the vertical. The fuselage pinches the bottom of the vertical stabilizer perfectly. Everything is in line. The only thing that's not in line yet that we need to adjust is the position of the the horizontal stabilizer and the north and south or up and down position that we have now, okay? Because we need to put this cutout tab right in the middle. So how do we figure that out? What is right in the middle? The easiest way to do this that I've found out is to do that measuring trick that I told you before. I'm going to measure this center, and I know this is exactly the center because we copied the first half that I drew and pasted it over and flipped it over. So it's exactly the same. Whatever the middle of this is the dead center of the entire piece, right? I know that for a fact. So now I'm going to take this number and I'm just going to cut it in half. And again, I'm really bad at math, so I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to put it up. So 437 divided by 2, 218. So if I go here now and tell this line I want you to be 218, I now have the middle of my piece. Okay? Now that I have the middle of the piece, I need to put this right here, this notch that we just made in the middle of the horizontal stabilizer. Okay, so I know the horizontal stabilizer middle is there, and I know the position is here for the tab. So all I have to make sure is that these two line up. So I'm going to grab my tab, which is this one right here, and I'm going to bring it over to this side so that I can get it in the middle, and then I'm just going to slide it over and put it into position. And what I can do now, because this is a little bit bigger, this is the middle right here. So if I find the middle of this piece too, so that is 74. So 74, again, I'm really bad at math, I don't want to even try. 74 divided by 2, 37. All right, so 37, oops. 37 now is in line. So if I move these two pieces together, if I hold down Control and click both of them, and then move this piece now, it's locked in there. If I lock this or line this up so that it's on the same pixel line as the other one, which I can tell by just looking at it, that's perfectly in the middle. This piece is now in the middle of this a horizontal stabilizer. Okay, so now if I just simply move this over, it's perfectly in the middle, and I just need to line it up with the position of the tab on the vertical. Okay, so we're going to zoom in real close just to make sure this is nice and good, nice and close, because we can get it. That's probably one too close. Okay, so there's roughly 1 pixel or 2 pixels wider on each side, so that's right in the middle, and then it's right in the middle of the horizontal. So now I can go ahead and delete this piece, my little reference line there, and I can go back and delete this other reference line. We don't need that. That's deleted. And now I'm going to join my hole, my cutout, with my horizontal stabilizer. So I'm going to put that on top, merge them, and there it is. You now have a perfectly set up piece of tail feathers. They will notch in perfectly. Your cutout is the right size. The hinge lines are good. This should go together perfectly. I shouldn't need to tweak this at all once I build it. So this is great. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and save so I don't lose any work there. And I'm simply going to just hide these pieces because right now I'm done with them. I don't care about them anymore. What I want to look at real quick now is the extra parts of the fuselage that you might need to take into account. One thing I did on the off time here is I finished up my formers and I put their position on the fuselage so that I know where they go, and just so you can see them, here are the formers. I simply made number 1 and then I stretched and smashed around the other ones, or I smashed number 1 to make the rest of them. Now what I might do is go back over these with my line tool and make them nice and clean so the line is the same size, because right now you can kind of tell that I smashed it, and it doesn't really matter, but you know, if you want it to look nice and professional and the plans to be really clean, then you want to go back over these and make them so the line is that 10 width the whole way around. But there's my pieces. It only took another 5 minutes, maybe, if even that, to make those, and those are good. So the next thing I want to do with my fuselage is I need to add the power pod holes, the tab holes, and really, if you made your fuselage the same width as the power pod like I did, you can really easily just go and grab these lines from one of the flight test plans or one from my plans, and you can just paste it over and get a good reference. So I've done that. I've grabbed the Chipmunk fuselage that I had already designed, just so I don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is a great way. Otherwise you need to measure and it just takes a little more time. But I've got my fuselage here. I'm just going to flip this around because these are standard things. These are the same. These are the pieces that are going to make the plane compatible with a power pod setup. Right? We've already designed the fuselage width and height and all that around it, but then now we need to make the tabs in line as well. Okay, so I've already created this work. No reason to do it again. Like I said, and in reality, even these cut lines for the A and B folds, I could have copied them and pasted them over. I didn't even need to recreate them, but for your guys' sake, to show you how I did it, I went ahead and did that. But for my next planes, when I'm just designing them, I don't even remake this part. If I'm going to make it as wide as the fuselage, I'll just copy that whole piece and copy it over. Right, done. It's very quick, and it makes your second plane, your third plane go a lot faster for your design. Okay, so again, if you're using the exact width of the power pod like I am, then this is a great way to do this. Just grab the FT Mustang, grab my Chipmunk, or whatever you want to do, and you can grab these pieces over, no problem. If you made your fuselage wider, if you chose to go the wider route and follow the size of the design of the actual fuselage and make it wider, then the power pod holes are going to go in the same spot for the notches. You just need to make sure that it's in the correct middle place. So you can still grab the template like I did here of another set of plans and line it up. Just make sure it's in the middle of your fuselage. Okay. All right. So the easiest way to do this, now that I have these pieces here, is actually just to erase the rest of what I don't want to keep. Okay. So it's in place. I lined it up with the front plate, and that's your alignment piece, is your front plate, not the fuselage. We want the front plate to be in line because that's where the motor mount's going to sit. So my tab's there. My second tab's there, everything fits nice. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab my eraser tool and I'm gonna erase the rest of this fuselage, okay? I don't care about the wing. This wing cutout I don't care about. I'm gonna leave this power pod piece, I like that. That's a nice little add there. So I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna erase this. I'm gonna erase this former number. Erase all this stuff. because my, oops, I didn't want to erase that notch though. Because my fuselage is the same width as the Chipmunk or as one of the other FT swappables, these skewer holes are also already all lined up. If you did a wider, like I said, wider design than the PowerPod size, you may have to adjust these a little bit, or I'm kind of moving them around. They should sit the same height from your folded edge, your fold here, because even though it's wider, they sit in the similar spot, but you'll want to kind of play with that. And really what I did originally is I grabbed a PowerPod cutout and I put it in place as if it was notched in, and I put the hole there. So it's not very hard to line that up. You just got to grab it and make sure that based on your fuselage and your plane design that those skewer holes already line up. Otherwise, people got to try and figure that out for themselves when they're cutting their plane, and it's kind of tricky. So definitely, get those skewer holes added, and the blue or the green line there is just to show, hey, you should use a reinforcement like a piece of plastic or whatever to strengthen those holes so that your plane doesn't just fall apart under use. That's one of the frustrations you have with using foam board, right? Is that the material just doesn't hold up to a crash. When the skewers in the foam, it'll rip it out, or it'll just stress it a lot. And over time, it ends up being a very weak part of the plane, and it ends up just letting go. So with those reinforcements, plastic there makes it super strong, makes it last for a very long time. I've crashed my plane really hard before, nose into the ground, going really fast, and the holes have not ripped. I've actually broken the skewers many times and not had any damage to the airframe other than some little stress crinkles or whatever. But that's just an idea of how strong it makes the foam. It does not want to let go. So definitely add those. Okay, so it looks like I've erased everything that's left over from the Chipmunk, just to make sure. I'm going to go ahead and close out of the view of that, the bottom piece, and I'm going to then make sure that the fuselage has been fully erased. So there's a couple of extra lines that I want to get rid of just to be sure, but it looks good. I think that's it. No leftover lines. So now I'm going to bring the fuselage back into view, and I'm going to join that with my fuse now that I had copied over. Merge those, and then there you go. You've got your PowerPod holes, you've got your skewer hole all lined up nice and clean. Okay, so that brings the fuselage into an almost completed position. The last thing is the wing cutout. This piece is a little tricky, and there is not a really easy way to do this. So I'm going to show you how I do it, and if you have any other ideas of how you think this might work, I'd love to hear it. But here's what I figured out. If I take my wing and I flip it around, so this is the leading edge, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this down. So it's like my plane's like a little paper plane here, everything's flat. I can get an idea of where the lines are going to go. Okay, so right now if I zoom in again, I should come up right now with a fairly close to accurate wing size, and if I look at it when I fold this all over and build it, it's going to shrink a bit, so I'm within a very small margin of being off in terms of the size, right? If you did this and you're like, you know what, something didn't end up right, the wing's way too wide or way too narrow, you might have to go back and adjust it. I really think this side view is maybe a little bit off because my other piece was also off, and I don't think I was that much off in both of them. So I'm gonna say, you know what, it doesn't matter. If anything, this is adding, a couple centimeters to the wing chord, and hey, that's a great thing if you want a nice floaty, slow flying plane. Okay, so what you want to do is flip it around as if it was installed, leading edge forward, trailing edge back, and then we want to pick out how low do we want the wing to sit. On the normal designs, the best thing to do is to put it about one sheet of foam up. So your belly plate is going to sit in between the sidewalls, so it's going to occupy this much space. Okay, so your belly plate is going to be between the sidewalls of the fuselage and be sitting here. So the belly plate is going to sit up like that, right? It's going to be running here. So the lowest you can go with your wing ultimately is to this line. So if I was going to do that, if that's what I wanted to decide, so my wing was sitting basically on the belly plate, I'd want to put it all the way down. Now this is a little tricky to work with because the foam it gets very weak when it's this small, and if you have a curve, you can't well, you can, but it's my chipmunk design has it like this, where it cuts out the bottom of the fuse, but it's a little difficult to work with. So I really recommend going up a bit based on the position, right? When I figure out, okay, where do I want to put the wing, I'm going to cut the difference on my slack on front and back and say this is good. And I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to bring it up so the highest point over here is still one sheet of foam wide. So if I go up, there is one sheet of foam. So if I grab my wing again, bring it down, that's as low as I'm going to go. Now the trailing edge should be sitting on the bottom plate. I can throw a little glue on there too if I want a little extra strength. But that's as low as I want to go. Okay, and that's the position width-wise I want to go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get rid of all these other lines that I just made. I don't actually care about these. Those are just for reference. Those are deleted. We have our vertical, our horizontal line where the bottom of the wing is going to sit. So I'm going to take this line here and I'm basically going to draw it. I'm going to just draw right over it. And one thing that we're going to talk about too right now is because of the way the airfoil raises, right, the height of the airfoil, it's going to change how long the wing is. Like I said, some of the space is going to be consumed when we fold the wing over. And so that means this cutout doesn't actually need to be the entire width of this piece. It needs to be a little bit shy because you're actually going to lose inches. You're going to lose space from the airfoil, and you're also going to lose space from this leading edge. When you bevel and then you fold over, you lose a significant amount of space in there just to the foam compressing and everything getting shorter. So with that being said, what I like to do is I start a little bit small, if anything. Because if I cut a hole that's too small initially, I can make it bigger when I'm putting it together with no problem. If I cut it too big, now I have a hole that's too big, and no one wants that, right? So what I want to start with is I'm actually going to stay basically what's referenced here in the image is how far I'm going to make this line go. Okay, it's a nice straight line. I'm going to hold my shift so I extend, and I'm going to say, you know what, that's how long I want to make my cut. One other comment just before we get any further. Your wing in a traditional fixed wing plane, okay, there's lots of exceptions, but in a traditional plane, unless you know otherwise and you understand why, I would say don't vary from a flat bottom wing, right? That's for your design, that you have a nice straight line here that is the same degree as your horizontal stabilizer. This line is also perfectly straight. My wing line on the bottom is going to be perfectly straight. I'm creating a neutral. There's no angle of attack. There's no thrust line issues. Everything is straight. Everything's neutral. The motor is going to pull neutral. The horizontal stabilizer is neutral, and the wing is neutral. Again, unless you know why you're changing that, or if you have a plane design that's already designed and it works, keep everything neutral. Okay, that neutral will fly. Non-neutral will fly when you account for the other things, which we're not going to go to in this video because it just gets very complicated and a little outside of what I wanted to get into with this design process. So stick with the neutral wing. It makes it a lot easier to build, makes it a lot easier to know it's going to fly. All right, that's all I'm going to say about that. So now that I've got my bottom cut thrown down, what I need to figure out is how do I make the rest of this? How do I determine how far the wing is going to go up? Where's the airfoil height? I can't tell that from this image because this image shows a dihedral. You're seeing the tip of the wing and then you're seeing the fuselage. You don't even see the rest of the wing. So it's kind of difficult from here. What we do know though is we know how tall the spar is and we know how tall each piece of foam is. This is one of the reasons why we measured that earlier as well. So we're going to go back and look at that right now. We're going to go to our spar, which is hidden somewhere. Where's my spar? My spar is there. And my spar should be, I believe, 1.2 centimeters is what I designed it to be. Yeah, we'll call it 1.22. Yeah, 1.2 is good. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so we're gonna go over here, and where did my line go? Did my line go away? Oh, there it is. What is this line? Where's line 8? I don't know. Line 9, we're just going to hide you for now. So line 8 is what I'm working on here. Okay, so I've got my 1.2 height for my spar, and I know each piece of foam is roughly 0.5 centimeters. So doing math there, you're looking at 2.2 centimeters tall. That accounts for both sheets of foam and the spar, assuming you have no other gaps, no other issues. And if I go right in the middle of the airfoil, at the highest point, this curve going down and this curve going down will both be the same height. Okay, so if I go from here 2.2 centimeters up, and from here 2.2 centimeters up, I now have the height of my cutout. These are reference lines. And quite simply, I'm going to connect everything now. This is really straightforward. I'm going to draw between these two a nice straight holding down shift line. There's one. And then from here, going back, I'm going to match up here, but I'm going to make this roughly 0.4 centimeters high. Not a full sheet, just a little bit less because I want this to be tight. And then I'm going to go from here, and I'm going to bring it up to here. And then on this next part, I'm going to do something similar, except I'm going to start drawing this part first. Let me get rid of this line and the wing. Oops, I want this line. 8. Yeah, okay. So I've got my line here, and now I need to make a nice curved wedge that's going to be about 1.5 sheets worth of foam thick. So one sheet of foam would be 0.5 centimeters, which is right about here. So I'm going to go up to about 0.70, and that's how much curve I want. Make sense? And the curve in the middle should be the furthest point forward. So I'm going to come forward just a little bit, and then I'm going to go up to this line and go straight back. So from right now, I'm just going to draw this line over to here. I did 1.5 widths of foam because when you do the bevel and glue and fold it over, it's thicker than one piece of foam, but it's not quite as thick as 2 pieces of foam. So this is just kind of a general, this is great to start with, okay? So I've got my 1.5 sheets of foam, thick, squared off nose, and I'm going to just simply make a bunch of little tiny small lines to round this off. Nothing magical about this, nothing special. There it is. There's your leading edge curve. All right, so now I'm going to go back and I want to remove these extra lines, these reference lines that I don't want, okay? So we're going to take out, let me zoom out a little bit so I can see everything. If someone knows a faster way to locate which line that is, I would be very grateful. So there's number 11 and number 10. We don't care about those two anymore. All right, shape 8. Oh, we got one more over there too. That needs to go away. Which one is that? I think it's... There it is, 15. Okay, delete it. All right, so everything that's left now should be my wing cut out. So I'm going to select all of these. I'm going to scroll up and I'm just going to merge. Or rasterize, and then I'm going to merge them. I'm going to zoom out, make sure I'm good there. There it is. There's my wing cutout. It's in position from front to back of the fuselage. It's in position for height, and I've got the right height for the foam, and I've got a very good idea of my my airfoil shape now. Now this isn't perfect. Every time I've done this, I've made a plane. What I've done before I've cut out the whole fuselage and printed it out, and we'll do this here in a little bit. We're gonna basically print out this much, and we're gonna cut that out. We're gonna make this its own piece. We're gonna cut that onto foam after we make the wing, and we're gonna try and slide it on. So the wing is gonna get built first, then we're gonna print out and cut this piece just like this to make sure it fits on the wing. So if it's too long, too short, too high, too rounded, whatever, we can make those adjustments, fix them on the plans, and then print out the entire fuselage. So you don't print out the whole fuselage, get it cut, it's all perfect, except the wing holes all off. We don't want that. We want it to be nice and clean, as good as we can right on the finished product. I don't have a desire to build 10 versions of a plane because you have to fix little tiny mistakes every time. So this is one of the ways you can avoid that, right? Having to put in a lot of work for no reason. So we'll get back to that when we get to the actual printing and cutting and gluing stage. But for now, I like that. I think it looks great. I'm gonna go ahead and join this wing, the shape 9 here into the fuselage. And there you go. Now it's built in. what I do now is I'm simply going to select this section, give a little bit of overlap like I can see all these different pieces. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to make a new document. I'm going to paste it, flip it over, copy it again, and bring it back in. Now I can line it up. I don't have to do that work, right? I have an identical cutout, and all I have to do is line up this square here. It should be in exactly the same position on the other side because I did the same thing for that one. I had first aligned that up. So that looks like it's perfect there. I'm going to double check by looking at my fuselage line. It's not lined up perfect, see that? So I need to drop it down a smidge, and then on the front here, is it lined up? This line should be perfect there. So that's perfect in terms of the forward position. How about the down? Let's see, this line right here should be perfect. And there it is. Now it's perfect. There's a perfectly aligned piece, and I can simply merge this new layer 1 into the layer of the fuse. Before I do that, I'm going to erase just to make sure I don't have any overlap that I don't care about. Don't want to see that. It shouldn't have any overlap because it should be lined up perfectly, but you know what? It's all good. Your knife's going to be you can make more error in your knife cut than that line is off, so I'm not worried about that. Okay, so that's joined now. So we now have a fuselage that has former positions, that has the top plate, that has the belly plate, that has the wing cutout, and is ready for testing. It's great, looks good to me. The only other thing that I'm going to mention right now that you should be aware of that we didn't talk about yet, that I kind of glazed over in the original part of the creation of the belly, is that my belly piece, even though it's all measured right, and it's great, I think it came out really good, there's one thing I need to account for still. So there's the end of it. Because this nose starts to curve up, from this point on the belly up, it's not going to bend. You can't just bend foam with paper on it. You have to remove the paper. So I need to add another line right here, right when it starts to curve. It is a remove paper line, because otherwise this is not going to work. So I need to account for that. So I'm just going to merge that into the belly because I know that has to happen. So that piece is good now. Now I'm happy with that. Alright guys, so the last thing we're going to look at now is the poster board. Now the poster board itself is a little, it's up to you in terms of preference. You can get an idea of what you need to start with from the side view, but you can't get a full idea of what the poster board is going to look like until you print it out and try it, or until you start with some paper and really just get designing. Since this is not a 3D program, it's very hard to gauge the length when you have a curve and all that stuff. But it's a very easy process to do. I'm going to start you off with what you need to do to get the poster board started, and then we're going to continue this in live feed when I show you how I do it. I do just regular paper. I kind of cut it to what I think, and I put it on my fuselage after I make it, and I use my pen and I measure and everything, and then we can transfer that physical design back into the digital prints, and I'll show you how I do that as well. That's how we'll make adjustments. Once from a digital side, we say, okay, this is as good as it's going to get, or we decide the next steps require a physical measure and a physical test to make sure it's good, then any adjustments we'll take pictures of them, and I'll show you how to do that, and then you can bring them back into Photoshop and make those adjustments without having to do any crazy measuring or anything like that. It's a very straightforward process, very easy to do, and I'll show you how I do that. But for right now, we're going to do the poster board that we can, so that you can at least get an idea of what you can do before you have to print anything out. Now, on this plane, I want to do these little winglets. I think they look awesome. So I'm just going to simply trace one of them. And this view does not account for the curve that's in this. So I'm going to have to account for that myself. So to do that, in terms of the height, I'm going to pick the same height, but I'm going to go a little bit wider. What do I mean by that? I mean, I'm going to cut it wider like this, because I'm going to glue it in the same spot, but again, as this curves, and has a little bend, you're losing, you know, space, and I can't account for that right now, so I'm just gonna guess. And really, this doesn't, you know, you can be off a little bit here and it still looks great. No one can tell. So I got a little bit wider, and now I'm gonna follow pretty much the same curve that exists already. And then when I come to the fuse again, I'm gonna come in a little bit wider. Now I'm gonna go straight up. Actually, I'm not going to go straight up because this is not lining up right. But mine is going to be straight. That's an interesting point. My fuselage is straight. So I'm going to call this straight here. I'm going to go to there. And I'm going to go back to this first line. And I'm going to read this line. I'm going to go from here down to here. So what that should end up doing then is when I have my straight fuse, and with the curve accounted for, this should end up looking very similar to what's on the actual airplane. Even though it's the design of it's a little different because we're dealing with a flat piece of paper once it's printed out versus once it's glued to a 3D object, right? So the shape is a little different, and you have to kind of work with that. So I'm going to go ahead and raster size these and merge them. And there's our winglet. So there's how you can do the winglets if you have those. Anything from the top view you can design that way. The next thing you can start doing is getting one side of your two pieces of foam, poster board set. So on this design, what I want to do is I want to have the poster board stop right about here. I don't want it to keep going. So I'm going to just pick a spot basically right here. I'm going to come down about as far as I want to go down, and on this plane I need to remember that it curves, right? So really I need to probably do an angled piece here. I'm probably going to go like this. Probably going to drop it down to an angle about like that, and then I'm going to go straight over, and then this is going to come out because I need a little bit more room to cut it and everything, right? I want to have a little bit of overlap. All right, so this first piece is going to go here, and the horizontal piece is going to sit right here. Remember we measured that, and actually I'm going to bring that piece back in to know right how far forward it goes, right? So I know right there that's as far as it ends, and I know that the position of it's going to be right on this fuselage. So if I draw this over to here, I can then go up one width of foam, which is actually, I'm going to go a little bit more than a width, so I'm going to go 0.59 versus 0.5. That way there's a little bit of slack. You don't want it too tight because it's going to bend and be a different shape. That's going to bring me up over the curve, and that's about as far as I'm going to be able to figure out on this image. Because this piece is actually going to come forward now at a bit of an angle, something like this, but I have no idea what that's going to look like until I print it out. So I'm not going to design those pieces yet because that's way easier to do on the, oops, what am I doing here? In the physical form. Okay, so I'm just going to stop it there. Actually, I'll leave this last line just to show that's where the end point is. And then the other thing I can do right now is I can go over to this point, and this is all the same height, same width, so it's going to be nice and good. I don't worry about that. But right here is where I'm going to end because I'm going to build my cockpit. So actually, I'm going to bring it back a little further, right about to the middle. That's where I like to do my line. Or if you want to be fancy and hide the line, you know, you can do some other creative stuff. But the piece of poster board isn't long enough to do this whole piece in one. It just isn't. I measured the fuselage actually, and this fuselage is longer than a piece of foam board too, so we're gonna have to cut it. It's gonna be two sections. So the poster board cannot be one piece from nose to tail. It's gonna be two. So we have to decide where do we want that groove, you know, where do we want that seam to be. Right in the middle is fine, right at the edge, you just kind of pick. I'm just gonna go with the middle right now because, hey, it works. So the middle line I'm gonna go ahead and draw up, and I'm gonna draw right to here, and then I'm gonna draw this little wing cut, or the cockpit cutout, okay? Because I'm gonna make it just like this. So I'm just going to follow this line, and this is my cut line now for my poster board. That's as much as I can do though, okay? And that actually is going to be a little different because it's going to curve a little more because of the way that, you know, the image is kind of skewed because it's we're looking at a flat image of a 3D object. So, but that's going to give me a good starting line, okay? So that's what I want there, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the front side. So now we're going to start here. We're going to come over, and then we're going to come up about to here. So I know that's there, and I'll go ahead and draw my second line with a little bit of overlap, right? We want a little bit of overlap for glue sake. And then the front of this, right now we're just going to come up. No big deal there. We'll figure that out. But that gives us a nice straight line to start with, and now I need to kind of break this piece up so that it's it's proper. So we're going to move the fuselage, we're going to hide these other pieces because we don't want to see them, just so they're not in the way. Okay, so now we just have the poster, and I need to break these pieces up into their own pieces of poster board. So this back piece, actually I'll just merge all these first, and then we can kind of mess around with them. It's probably easier. So that's the whole poster board, should be one piece. But I want to cut it right here in the middle. How do I do that? I'm simply going to select from here, go back, control copy, and then control paste. So now I have my own piece here that's the back piece of foam, or a poster board, and then I'm going to go back on the whole piece, and I'm just going to delete this back piece because I don't care about that anymore. And actually I just made it too short. I just took off my overlap. So to fix that, I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to redraw this last little piece. Make it a little bit longer so there is overlap. And then this piece I'm going to move down, just so everything lines up nice and clean. And we're going to go ahead and close that off. And we're going to merge these ones together. So we have our tail poster. Oops. And we have our nose poster. I guess I'll be consistent here. Poster nose. Okay. And the next thing we can add on right now is the curve piece. So our fuselage is going to show us where the formers go, and my last former is here, and then there's no former, so it's going to bend and lose height, just a natural curve. So to do that, I need to say right here, oops, my poster board is going to have a cut. And I'm going to do right about to there. And I don't know what it's going to look like just yet. Well, I'll know when I cut it out, but really it's going to be something like very, very, very gradual like that. So I'm going to do real narrow right now, just to say do that cut, just to test it out, and then that can be adjusted as I need. So I'm going to merge these pieces into the nose poster. So there's that, and then I'm just going to go ahead and delete this little tiny gap here. Oops, wrong tool. There it is. So there is my groove. That should give enough overlap, to a degree. And then what I'm going to have to do too, and again, once we print it out, we'll know this, is this piece actually is going to curve up just slightly. Because as it bends down to fill in this curve, the poster will go lower, right? So to have a nice straight line all the way down, we'll have to cut a groove. But we'll do that once we actually get it printed out. So for right now, I've got my nose poster board, at least as good as I'm going to get it. I've got my tail poster board, about as good as I'm going to get it as well. These are going to line up with a slight overlap for glue purposes. And then once I figure out one side of it, I'll just, like I said, take a picture of it. I'll show you how to do that, scale it right, and then just copy and flip it over like we've done the other pieces, and you have now a perfectly symmetrical piece for foam board. Then I'll print that one out and test it and make sure it's good, but usually by that point it's good to go. Alright guys, so that's actually going to conclude this video. We just covered how to finish off your fuselage. Let's save that. With your skewer holes, with your power pod holes, making sure your alignment's good, putting your wing cutout on. We did poster board, positioning and creation there, and we did our tail feathers alignment, testing in terms of the position for everything, its placement on the plane, and then we also made the tabs so that it can, when you print it out and cut it, it'll be perfectly in center and straight. So guys, I want to thank you for watching. We're getting close to the end here. We're about done with the digital side, and I think the next video we're going to jump right into printing the plans and starting our test build. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this so far. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'd love to answer anything you have, or if you have any tips with my Photoshop use. I had someone give me a tip on how to do some other adjustments and everything, and I appreciate that. So guys, please keep them coming. I'm not an expert user, so anything you know that I don't, I'd love to hear about it. All right guys, have a good one.